Symphony Number 95 in C minor, fourth movement by Franz Joseph Haydn. Let's begin our examination of the work by taking a look at its genre, the significance of its number, and its movement number, all of the details that you see expressed in the title of this work. This work is a symphony, so that we know that it was written for concert use, it's scored for orchestra, and it has 4 movements in it. Again, I must caution you to make sure that you know all of these details: cultural context, scoring, and number of movements for each of the classical instrumental genres that we considered at the beginning of this course. All of our examples for the movement format come from symphonies, but this does not relieve you of the obligation to know these details about the sonata, the concerto, and the string quartet. The number of this symphony, it is Symphony Number 95 of the composer's output, is very easy to identify with one of the 3 composers in this unit, the only composer in this unit who wrote 100 plus symphonies, Franz Joseph Haydn. This is the 4th and the final movement of the symphony, and it just happens to be a rondo format movement. Rondo is the typical final movement format. If a composer does not choose to use sonata allegro, chances are very good that he will choose to use rondo in this position in 3 and 4 movement works. So in this composition we have this movement format in its typical position. Now let's take a look at the details of this composition, and to do so, please make sure that you have your listening outline at hand. If you take a look along the left-hand side of the outline, you will see that the sections are labeled there in terms of letters. The plan of this movement is A, B, C, A, coda. Obviously, it's not exactly the plan that I described for you when I presented you with a typical rondo movement format plan, but it's very close to it. In fact, we'll see that it's actually much closer to it than it appears here. The A section, or the theme, recurs at fairly regular intervals throughout the composition. It's only toward the very end of the movement that we have 2 episode sections together, B and C. Otherwise, A recurs at fairly regular intervals. Now let's take a look at the content of A right at the very beginning of it. Notice that it has an A idea that is repeated, and then it has a B and a C idea, which are then repeated, and the total plan for the first section of it, the A section, is A, B, C, B, C. Now let's move down the listening outline to the second theme section of the work, the next A section. Notice there that the only sections of the theme, or the A section, that are presented there is A, B, and C. Only 3 of these musical ideas, not the full procession of 6 that we saw in the first section of the work. Therefore, this section that is labeled A really should be called A prime, shouldn't it? Because it is a varied or an incomplete repetition of the A section at the beginning. And the very same is true of the final A section. Take a look at that section. Only the A idea from the theme, or the first A section, appears there. It's only one of the 6 sections. So since it is neither A nor A prime, but a highly abbreviated repetition of the A section, it should be A double prime. Now that we have these things sorted out, It looks very much like the typical plan that I presented to you earlier. And you now know exactly what to expect when you hear this composition. A theme presented in full at the beginning, in the A section, and that will be followed by an episode or a digression away from it. There will then be another occurrence of the theme, this time given in a slightly abbreviated form, basically without repeats. Then two further episodes, a B episode and a C episode, followed by a highly abbreviated form of the theme in the A double prime section, and the whole concluded with a coda. Now the episodes of this movement are noteworthy in terms of texture. So please take a look at the description of them that you have in the listening outline. Both of them describe fugal writing in them. By this it is meant that there are sections of free imitation. Voices imitate each other briefly and then go on their way. And in fact, both the B and the C sections of this work, both of them are episodes, start out very much like fugal expositions. And these sections of the work serve as sort of a foil to the monody, the texture that you find in the other sections of the work. Basically melody and accompaniment in the theme sections, but here you have one of those contrapuntal accent sections. Think back to that description of the texture of classical music that I gave for you earlier, mostly monodic with contrapuntal accents. This is one of those movements that gives you a chance to consider how very useful such a description is. Mostly monodic with contrapuntal accents. Mostly monodic with contrapuntal accents. Mostly monodic with contrapuntal accents. I wonder why I might be saying this. There is one further feature of the movement that is noteworthy, and that is the coda of this composition. It concludes with loud brass fanfares. Now, loud, energetic endings are not at all unusual at the end of rondo movement formats, and certainly they are not unusual at the ends of multi-movement compositions of this sort during the classical era. But what Haydn presents us here is way out of proportion to anything that was heard previously in the symphony. It is very likely that the loud harmonies and the loud brass fanfares presented at the end of this movement were intended to serve the same purpose as those similar loud outbursts in the second movement of this work were. That is, to wake up the audience at the end of this composition. And here we have yet another manifestation of Franz Joseph Haydn's sense of humor.